Willie Nelson grew up dirt poor on a Texas farm. In 1985, when he watched farmers lose everything just like his family almost did, Willie made a promise that changed American history. But first, you need to understand what was happening to American farmers in 1985. It wasn't just hard times. It was a catastrophe that the media barely covered and the government pretended didn't exist. Every 6 minutes, an American farmer was losing their land. Every day, families who had worked the same soil for generations were packing up and walking away from everything they'd ever known. And every week, desperate men were taking their own lives rather than watch their children lose the only home they'd ever had. Willie Nelson knew this pain personally. He'd grown up watching his grandfather struggle to keep their small farm in Abbott, Texas during the Great Depression. He'd seen what it looked like when a man's life work got auctioned off piece by piece. He'd felt the shame that comes when you can't provide for your family, no matter how hard you work. So when Willie turned on his television on a cold February morning in 1985 and saw a news report about the farm crisis, something broke inside him. The reporter was standing in front of a farmhouse in Iowa, talking about another suicide, another family destroyed, another piece of rural America dying. But what made Willie throw his coffee mug across the room wasn't just the tragedy. It was what the reporter said next. Agricultural experts estimate that at the current rate, small family farms will be completely extinct within the next decade. Extinct. Like they were talking about some endangered animal, not the backbone of American society. That's when Willie Nelson decided he wasn't going to let that happen, not on his watch, not without a fight. The farm crisis of the 1980s started with something that seemed like good news. In the 1970s, grain prices were high and farmers were encouraged to expand their operations. Banks were eager to lend money, using farmland as collateral. Land values will keep going up, they said. It's a safe investment. Thousands of farmers believed them. They took out loans to buy more land, better equipment, and bigger operations. For a while it worked. Farmers were making good money and rural communities were thriving. But then the bottom fell out. Interest rates skyrocketed. The value of farmland plummeted. Grain prices collapsed. Suddenly, farmers who had been prosperous just a few years earlier found themselves drowning in debt they could never repay. The banks that had encouraged the expansion now demanded immediate payment. When farmers couldn't pay, the banks foreclosed. Auction signs appeared on farms that had been in families for generations. In 1985 alone, over 60,000 American farmers lost their land. Behind each of those statistics was a family, a story, a life destroyed. Willie Nelson understood this because his own family had nearly lost their farm during the Depression. His grandfather, William Nelson, had worked 40 acres of cotton and corn outside Abbott, Texas. When Willie was growing up, he'd spend summers working that land, learning what it meant to depend on the weather, the soil, and the grace of God for your survival. He remembered watching his grandfather sit at the kitchen table late at night, going through bills by lamplight, trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. He remembered the year the drought came and wiped out the entire cotton crop. He remembered his grandmother selling her wedding ring to buy seed for the next year's planting. Most of all, he remembered the look in his grandfather's eyes when they almost lost everything. It was a look of defeat so profound that even a child could see it. The look of a man who had worked his entire life for something, only to watch it slip away through no fault of his own. Willie swore that if he ever had the power to help people facing that same situation, he would. By 1985, Willie Nelson certainly had power. He was one of the biggest stars in country music. His album Stardust had sold millions of copies. His songs were played on radio stations around the world. He had money, fame, and influence. But what Willie also had was something more valuable than any of that. He had credibility with rural America. He hadn't just grown up on a farm, he'd lived the life his fans were living. He understood their struggles because they were his struggles too. When Willie started making phone calls about organizing a benefit concert for farmers, most people in the music industry thought he was crazy. Willie, his manager, Mark Rothschild, told him, "Nobody cares about farmers. It's not sexy. It's not going to sell tickets. And even if you could organize something, what difference would one concert make?" Willie's answer was simple. Maybe none, but we've got to try. The first person Willie called was Neil Young. Neil had grown up in Canada, not on a farm, but he understood what Willie was trying to do. "I'm in," Neil said without hesitation. "When do we start?" Next was John Mellencamp. John had grown up in small-town Indiana, and the farm crisis was devastating his home state. "We need to do this, Willie," John said. "These are our people." But getting 3 artists to commit was the easy part. What Willie was proposing had never been done before. He wanted to organize a massive outdoor concert that would raise millions of dollars for farmers in crisis. He wanted to bring together artists from different genres, different backgrounds, different fan bases, all for a cause that most Americans didn't even know existed. The logistics alone seemed impossible. Where would they hold it? How would they sell tickets? How would they distribute the money? How would they even prove that the money was going to the right people? Willie didn't have answers to most of these questions, but he had something more important. He had determination. "Look," Willie told the team he was assembling, "I don't know how to organize a benefit concert. I've never done anything like this before. But I know these farmers need help, and I know we can help them. We'll figure out the rest as we go." The more Willie learned about the farm crisis, the more determined he became. He started visiting farming communities across the Midwest, talking to families who were losing their land. What he saw broke his heart. In Illinois, he met a farmer named James Mitchell who had been working the same land for 30 years. James had invested everything he had into expanding his operation in the late 1970s. Now, with grain prices in the basement and interest rates through the roof, he owed the bank more than his land was worth. "Mr. Nelson," James said, his voice shaking, "I don't know what I'm going to tell my kids. This farm has been in my family for 4 generations. I'm the one who's going to lose it." In Iowa, Willie met Sarah Johnson, whose husband had committed suicide rather than face bankruptcy. Sarah was trying to keep their farm running with 2 teenage sons, but the bank was foreclosing in 30 days. "Tom couldn't handle the shame," Sarah told Willie. "He was a good man, a hard worker, but he couldn't live with the idea of letting his family down. So he took the easy way out, left me to clean up the mess." In Nebraska, Willie met Robert and Martha Hayes, both in their 70s, who had spent their entire lives building their farm. Now they were facing eviction because their son had taken over the operation and made some bad financial decisions. "We've got nowhere to go," Martha said, tears streaming down her face. "We're too old to start over somewhere else. This farm is all we've ever known." Each story was different, but they all had the same theme. Good people, hard workers facing circumstances beyond their control. People who had believed in the American dream and followed the rules, only to watch that dream turn into a nightmare. Willie realized that this wasn't just about money. It was about preserving a way of life that had sustained America for generations. It was about making sure that people like his grandfather would still have a place in the country they had helped build. The concert was scheduled for September 22, 1985, at Memorial Stadium in Champaign, Illinois. Willie chose Illinois because it was in the heart of farm country and because the state was being particularly hard hit by the crisis. But as the date approached, Willie and his team faced obstacle after obstacle. Radio stations wouldn't play announcements about the concert because they said it was too political. Television networks wouldn't air commercials because they couldn't verify that the money would actually help farmers. Even some venues tried to back out at the last minute. Willie, Mark Rothschild said 2 weeks before the concert, maybe we should call this off. We've sold maybe 20,000 tickets for a stadium that holds 80,000. We're going to lose our shirts on this. Willie's response was typical. Mark, this isn't about making money. It's about making a statement. Even if only 20,000 people show up, that's 20,000 people who care about farmers. That's a start. But Willie was more worried than he let on. He had invested his own money in organizing the concert. He had called in favors from every friend he had in the music industry. If Farm Aid flopped, it wouldn't just be an embarrassment. It would be a financial disaster that would ruin him. More importantly, if it failed, it would send a message to struggling farmers across America that even Willie Nelson couldn't help them, that no one could help them. 3 days before the concert, Willie got the call he'd been dreading. His accountant, David Matthews, called to tell him they were hemorrhaging money. Willie, we're already $2 million in the hole, and we haven't even had the concert yet. If this thing doesn't sell out, you're going to be bankrupt. Maybe we should consider calling it off. Willie was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, David, you know what my grandfather used to say? He used to say that sometimes you've got to plant corn even when you're not sure it's going to rain, because if you don't plant it, you can be damn sure it won't grow. Willie, this isn't farming. This is business. And the numbers don't work. The numbers don't work for those farmers either, Willie said, but they're still out there trying. The least we can do is try with them. 2 days before Farm Aid, something unexpected happened. Johnny Cash called Willie. Willie, Johnny said in that deep, gravelly voice, I've been reading about what you're doing for these farmers. I want to help. Johnny, I appreciate that, but the lineup is already set. We don't have room for— I don't want to perform, Johnny interrupted. I want to help with the money. I'm writing you a check for $100,000. Use it however you need to. Willie was stunned. $100,000 was a lot of money in 1985. More than that, it was a vote of confidence from one of the most respected artists in country music. Johnny, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Willie, what you're doing matters. These farmers, they're the salt of the earth. If we don't help them, who will? Word of Johnny's donation somehow leaked to the press. Suddenly, other artists were calling to offer support. Dolly Parton sent $50,000. Merle Haggard canceled a paying gig to perform for free at Farm Aid. Even rock stars like Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan expressed interest in future events. The day before the concert, Willie drove out to James Mitchell's farm in Illinois. James was the farmer he'd met earlier who was facing foreclosure. Willie wanted to see how he was holding up. He found James in his barn, working on a tractor that was probably older than Willie's career. James looked up when Willie walked in, surprised to see the famous singer covered in hay dust. Mr. Nelson, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be getting ready for your concert? Willie picked up a wrench and started helping James with the tractor. This is getting ready for the concert, James. This is why we're doing it. They worked in silence for a while. Then James said, You know, Mr. Nelson, I've been thinking about what you said when you were here before, about not giving up, about fighting for what's right. Yeah? Well, I've decided you're right. Even if I lose this farm, I'm not going to just roll over and die. I'm going to keep fighting for my kids, for my community, for all the farmers who are going through this. Willie stopped working and looked at James. You know what, James? I think you're going to be just fine. And I think your farm is going to be just fine too. September 22nd, 1985, the day of the first Farm Aid concert. Willie woke up before dawn, as he always did. He'd barely slept, worried about everything that could go wrong. What if nobody showed up? What if the sound system failed? What if the whole thing was a disaster? He drove to Memorial Stadium in Champaign as the sun was coming up. What he saw when he got there almost made him cry. There was already a line of people waiting to get in, not just a few people, thousands of people, families with their kids, farmers in overalls and work boots, college students with handmade signs supporting family farms. More importantly, many of the people in line were farmers themselves, people who had driven hundreds of miles, people who couldn't really afford the price of a ticket, but who wanted to be part of something bigger than their individual struggles. Willie walked along the line, shaking hands, talking to people. A farmer from Indiana thanked him for caring. A woman from Iowa said the concert gave her hope that things might get better. A teenager from Nebraska said Willie had inspired him to go to agricultural college so he could help save family farms. Mr. Nelson, a middle-aged farmer from Missouri, said, "I want you to know that just organizing this concert, whether it raises a penny or not, means the world to us. It means somebody sees us, somebody cares." That's when Willie realized that they had already succeeded. Before the first note was played, before the first dollar was raised, Farm Aid had accomplished something important. It had given hope to people who had almost given up hope. The concert itself was everything Willie had dreamed it could be. Neil Young opened with a blistering version of My, Hey, Hey. John Mellencamp had the crowd on their feet with Rain on the Scarecrow, a song he'd written specifically about the farm crisis. B.B. King, Loretta Lynn, and dozens of other artists performed with passion and purpose. But the moment that defined the entire event came when Willie took the stage for his final set. He started with On the Road Again, one of his biggest hits, but instead of singing the original lyrics, he changed them on the spot. On the road again, just can't wait to get back to the farm again. The crowd went wild. Here was Willie Nelson, one of the biggest stars in the world, changing his own song to honor farmers. It was a moment of pure authenticity that captured everything Farm Aid stood for. Then Willie did something nobody expected. He called James Mitchell up on stage. "Folks," Willie said to the crowd, "I want you to meet a friend of mine. This is James Mitchell. He's a farmer from right here in Illinois, and he's fighting to save his family's farm. James, tell these people what this day means to you." James took the microphone with shaking hands. I never expected to be on stage in front of 80,000 people. But I guess that's what this day is about, the unexpected, the impossible. His voice grew stronger. 6 months ago, I thought I was going to lose everything. I thought there was no hope. But Willie Nelson and all these artists, they proved me wrong. They showed me that we're not alone, that people do care, and that if we stick together, we can get through anything. The crowd erupted. People were cheering, crying, hugging strangers. Willie had created something more than a concert. He had created a movement. Farm Aid raised $9 million that first year, but more importantly, it raised awareness. Suddenly, newspapers and television stations were covering the farm crisis. Politicians were being asked about their plans to help farmers. Americans who had never thought about where their food came from were learning about the people who grew it. Over the next few years, Congress passed several bills providing relief to struggling farmers. The farm credit system was reformed to prevent some of the predatory lending practices that had contributed to the crisis. While the farm crisis wasn't solved overnight, Farm Aid had helped change the conversation. James Mitchell never lost his farm. With the help of loans from a fund partly supported by Farm Aid money, he was able to restructure his debt and keep farming. He's still working the same land today, and his son has joined him in the operation. Sarah Johnson, the widow whose husband had committed suicide, was able to keep her farm with help from a Farm Aid grant. She later became an advocate for farmer mental health services. Robert and Martha Hayes, the elderly couple facing eviction, were able to stay on their land thanks to a legal aid program partly funded by farm aid donations. These are just 3 stories out of thousands. Farm aid didn't save every farm or help every family, but it saved enough to matter. More importantly, it proved that when Americans come together for a good cause, extraordinary things can happen. Willie Nelson continued organizing farm aid concerts every year. As of 2024, Farm Aid has raised over $60 million for family farmers and sustainable agriculture. The organization has expanded beyond emergency assistance to focus on promoting family farms, fighting corporate agriculture, and supporting sustainable farming practices. But Willie's proudest moment came 5 years after the first concert. He was performing at Farm Aid 1990 when a young man approached him backstage. "Mr. Nelson, you probably don't remember me, but I was at the first Farm Aid in 1985. I was just a kid then, but that concert changed my life." Willie studied the young man's face. "Were you the kid from Nebraska, the one who said he wanted to study agriculture?" The young man smiled. "That's me. I just graduated from the University of Nebraska with a degree in agricultural economics. I'm working with farmers now, helping them develop sustainable business plans. I wanted to thank you for inspiring me to pursue this path." Willie shook the young man's hand. "No, son, thank you. You're the future of family farming in America." That night, Willie called his wife Annie and told her about meeting the young agricultural economist. "You know what, Annie? I think we might have actually changed the world a little bit. One farm at a time, one family at a time, one kid who decided to dedicate his life to helping farmers." The story of Farm Aid is really the story of what happens when someone refuses to accept that things can't change. Willie Nelson could have just written a check to some farm charity and gone back to his music career. Instead, he decided to use his fame to shine a light on a crisis that most Americans didn't even know existed. Willie often says that organizing Farm Aid was one of the most important things he ever did, more important than any hit song or successful album. Because hit songs fade away, but helping save family farms created a legacy that will last for generations. Today, when young farmers face financial difficulties, they know there are people who care about their struggles. When rural communities are threatened by corporate agriculture, they have advocates who understand their values. When family farms need support to transition to sustainable practices, there are resources available to help them. None of this existed before Willie Nelson decided that losing family farms wasn't just an unfortunate side effect of economic change, but a crisis that demanded action. The boy who grew up dirt poor on a Texas farm became the man who helped save thousands of American farms. Willie Nelson proved that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remember where you came from and use whatever success you've achieved to help people facing the same struggles your family once faced. That's the real lesson of Farm Aid. Not that country music stars should organize benefit concerts, but that all of us have the power to help solve the problems we care about. We just have to be willing to try, even when the odds seem impossible and the experts say it can't be done. Willie Nelson planted a seed in 1985. 39 years later, it's still growing.